We've done it. It's the last one. The last build guide. Ah! Ah! Almost done. Ugh. These have taken so much work, but we're getting there. We're getting to the end. Welcome to the build guide for the Wood Elves. Now, if you haven't watched any of these before, there's two parts. One part, we go through every unit on the roster and talk about its best use case, not whether or not it's currently good on the patch. And then we'll go back and check out a couple builds that are actually good on this patch, patch 6.1. Ready, set, go. Let's do this. Wood Elven Lords. You have a decent variety of Lord options. Let's start with the basics. You have the Glade Lord, the Glady. This is your ranged variant. Even though the other one also has a ranged shot, this is mostly a ranged Lord. She has some buffs for like speed and leadership and stuff, but she mostly has things to help missile units out, including a net that lowers missile resistance and her own Arrow of Kurnos, which is a special triple arrow magic missile she can fire. She can be on Great Stag for armor-piercing stats or on a Great Eagle to be elusive in the sky. Can also put her on a Forest Dragon, though that is a bit spendy for kind of okay duelist stats. She's mostly meant to be a skirmish lord who occasionally takes certain fights. Glade Lord, the other side, also has a bow, but he is more about melee buffs, has Deadly Onslaught and Foe Seeker, and he has some buffs for melee attack and melee defense, including a big Helm of Discord debuff for your opponents. He can also be on the same mounts. Forest Dragon if you want armor piercing and breath attacks, or just an Eagle if you want to be fast. Great Stag if you're on the ground and want more armor piercing too. Oh, where to start? We'll stay on generics for now. For the generic casters, you have 5 lures of magic you can get: Beast, Dark, High, Life, and Shadows for various tactics. You have good casters who can use Arcane Conduit to get more Winds of Magic faster. Loic's Blessing to keep themselves safe by hiding. You have Blessing of the Agents, which gives you more power recharge and spell mastery if you're in the forest. That is decent. They can be on Eagles to get anywhere on the map very quickly, and with melee stats, or a Unicorn to be tanky on the ground, especially against spells. Spell resistance of Unicorns is very potent. If you're worried about Rancid Visitations of Nurgle, could take a Unicorn. Last generic lord is an Ancient Tree Man. Mostly comes with life magic. I believe with unit caps on the Wargrave of Woe is not available. Unable to recruit with unit caps, yeah. So you can only take the life one, normally. Power Stone gives him increased Winds of Magic generation 1 time. Other than that, he has some basic buffs, but is mostly just a incredibly tanky caster. High HP, high armor, high melee defense, giant tree man. Still a little weak to getting shot by armor-piercing missiles way up in the sky, and he is weak to fire. But he has the Ancient Protector AoE, so does Durthu, that removes magic attacks. So that means his physical resistance while in melee can't be superseded. So whoever's fighting him will do 20% less damage. They can't have magic attacks near him. For another tree, Durthu, not a life caster, a beasts caster, with the Sword of Daith AoE blob punishment spell, and then he can also bring Flock of Doom for double blob punishment. Durthu is the king of blob fights, and he is also an incredible duelist, so he kind of gets rid of all your support and then 1v1s you to win. Durthu's main problems would be that he is very expensive and slow, so he often can't catch up to the people he wants to beat up. He makes the fights try and come to him. Lamentation of Despair can be a magic missile you cast on cooldown to harass people who are ignoring you. Durthu is a boss fight that you have to deal with. For another tree, but smaller, Drycha. Small, hybrid duelist caster lord. Cast Shadows, can increase enemy cooldowns when she casts stuff, since she has a one-time use of a Branch Wraith summon. That is about it. As she gets lower on HP, she gets higher dueling stats, though she is not that tanky. With only 40 melee defense and 5,000 HP, no way of healing, Drycha can be a little susceptible to getting sniped out. Then we have Orion and Sisters of Twilight, not casters, but different fighters. Orion has these giant spears he chucks at things while he's running after them, and then has very good duelist stats. He's great at grinding through anything. He just wants a melee fight against pretty much anything. Has some Hounds of Orion and Hawk's Talon, 2 different bound spells that he can use to clear out chaff that's surrounding him. Horn of the Wild Hunt gets a global charge bonus, which can be nice, but his Cloak of Isha is the main reason people take him. 20% damage resistance and healing when he is low, and he is unbreakable since he's Orion, so you don't have to worry about him running off or anything before he gets his healing. His healing will constantly proc when you think you get him low, which can make him a great bait piece. People get him low and they think they can finish him off, and then he just gets crazy tanky and beats the crap out of them. Finally, Sisters of the Twilight. Double archers up in the sky. They're kind of like an elven bolt thrower in that they have the shots they can do where they shoot one missile that does good damage to single entities, or they fire spread missiles that do good damage to blobs or infantry. They have various shots they can do. They have to be on an eagle or a dragon. The no mount option just means they're on an eagle. They have to be flying. The dragon can give them increased melee stats and breath attacks and a larger HP pool. And they do have a self-heal, though it is very hard to trigger and stay alive. If they get low, they can get a little bit of healing to help themselves out. On to heroes. Oh crap, Unicaps is on. You can't take Coadil. He's not real. He's not really, can't hurt you. Waystalker, like the Glade Lord, the Glady, has Arrow of Kronos and some buffs for nearby archer units. That is about it. It's just a foot archer who can snipe out and has okay melee stats, though is very squishy in melee. Glade Captain is meant to be the clone of the Glade Lord, more melee focused with some mount options as well. So good melee buffs for nearby allies. They themselves are a bit of a duelist. Then you have your two caster heroes, 3 if you count Ariel. Spellsinger can do beasts, life, or shadows, not dark magic like their Lord counterpart. Power Stone for a little bit of winds magic generation, and of course they have Blessing of the Ancients if they're in the woods. And your Branch Wraith has a mixed lore of magic, shadows, and life. Again, better spellcasting if they're in the woods. They have some spell resistance things. Couple melee buffs, and they themselves are okay melee combatants. Then there's Ariel. Legendary hero of the Wood Elves. Is spooky. I think she causes terror. Yep, she causes terror to anybody nearby. Has okay-ish melee stats. Okay-ish. Has tons of healing through Apotheosis as her spell. Mixed spell lore between high magic, dark magic, and life magic. But she can heal herself with Soul Stealer, punish blobs of dwellers, punish air units of Tempest. Has a lot of diverse spells. Her abilities, she also has a lot of ways to regenerate Winds of Magic, Blessing of the Ancients, or Greater Arcane Conduit. But then she has 3 special items, Acorn of the Ages, Dart of Doom, and Berrywine. Dart of Doom does good single target damage and debuffs them. Acorn of the Ages does good multi-entity damage and debuffs them. And Berrywine crazy heals up 1 unit on your roster 1 time. Whew. Got through the Lord and Heroes. On to infantry. This section should be pretty quick, as their infantry isn't that diverse. First up, you have your basic spearmen. Eternal Guard. Some of the cheapest armor-piercing spears in the entire game, though their stats are middling and they don't often perform that well. For 475 gold, they are rather squishy for spearmen units, but they do the job, I suppose. You can also upgrade them for 75 more gold, get shields, and 8 more melee defense. Or you can go all the way up to the Winterheart Guard for 850. They get Unbreakable and very high stats. So this doesn't even feel like the same unit as the Eternal Guard, but it is technically the Regiment of Renown, though it is almost twice the gold spend of a basic one without shields. Then you have your aggressive infantry, Dryads, still not doing the most damage just yet. 550 gold. These guys are weird generalists. Low melee defense is a problem. Not that good HP pools, though. They're elves, so none of the elves really have that good of an HP pool. But 60 armor for only 550 gold is something. 43 speed is also quite nice. Magic damage, high weapon strength, immune to psychology, cause fear, and physical resistance is all a lot to get for 550. So these guys can be good in that aspect, though they are not actually that good at dealing damage. Wraiths of the Frozen Heart are the ROR. They have a chilling aura, so constant 30% slow, and then if they get you, you get another 30% slow from Frostbite, so they can get a 60% slow just chasing stuff down. Frenzy gives them higher melee stats, and they already have higher melee stats than your basic Dryad counterparts, so a lot of melee damage coming out of these guys. Wraiths of the Frozen Heart are much more of a Berserker unit. Speaking of Berserker units, why don't we just get some Berserkers? War Dancers are almost copy-pasted Norscan Berserkers. Crazy good against light infantry, do a ton of damage against light infantry, not very good against heavy infantry or cav or archers. They can have Shadow's Coil, that makes them a little tankier in melee. They can also have Woven Mist, which makes them tankier against arrows. And they are ITP with a bit of physical resistance, though they are crazy squishy, so keep them away from mass. War Dancers with the Azrai Spears are the opposite. They want to get near mass and they want to mess it up. Have the same 2 dances they can do. They're also ITP, also physical resistance, but they get significant bonus versus large and a higher melee defense than their War Dancer counterparts. Worse at killing infinite infantry, though. Wildwood Rangers are your great swords, anti-infantry armor piercing, very high stats, and they have Guardians of the Wildwood. If a terror-causing unit is in range, they get 25% more damage and plus 10 melee attack, which is quite nice. It's interesting that the greatsword version care about a terror-causing unit being in range, seeing as how they don't have bonus versus large. The Wardens of Sithral Wildwood Rangers do have bonus versus large, and they have the same Guardians of the Wildwood, so they make a little more sense, and they even offer armor sundering to boot, making it easier for other units to get good damage on those large targets, softening them up for your archers, perhaps. War Dancers, Azrai Spear, ROR, Loix Tricksters. I missed those when I was talking about the War Dancer, Azrai Spears. They have a third dance, the Storm of Blades. They can get plus 24 melee attack, sacrificing 24 melee defense, and Frenzy. You can give plus 34 melee attack, so 74 for these guys, and then 23 bonus versus large. Gets them up to 99 melee attack versus large targets. Can be nice. Their weapon strength isn't the highest, however. 100 model count is nice, but low armor and low HP pools means it's pretty easy to lose models. These guys are a little squishy. You need to get the right fight for them. You can't let them get charged by the large target that they're trying to fight. Finally, you have Blade Singers, the most elite Wood Elf killers in the entire game. Impressive anti-infantry bonus, gives them 60 base melee attack, and then of course they have the dances again where they can increase their melee defense by lowering their melee attack, but they can also change their damage profile to reduce armor piercing in favor of base damage if they're busy killing random chaff as quickly as possible. Blade Singer's high leadership and very high stats help them get through... Help get them through front lines super quickly. They have dodge, which is just a fancy way of saying they have physical resistance. For the main damage profile of this roster, we have the archers. Wood Elves have 3 archers. Each of them have variants. Glade Guard, basic Glade Guard have high melee stats and decently high range, high missile strength, and then fire while moving. They don't have 360 shot, but they can move while advancing on something, which can be quite solid. 500 gold, they are the best 500 gold archer in the entire game. You can upgrade them with 100 gold to a Hagbane tip or 150 to a Starfire shaft. Hagbane tips gives them poison and magic damage. That's about it. Otherwise, yeah, same stats overall. So just if you want 100 gold for the poison and magic damage versus like demons. Starfire shafts are the big winners, the big upgrade. Less missile strength by just a little bit, but it's armor piercing, which is almost always worth it. And then fire damage and magic attacks is pretty huge. Starfire shafts are the kings of cheap archers in the entire game. I love these guys. I almost always take 5. Their fire damage reduces healing. Their armor piercing gets through anything elite, heavy cav or heavy infantry or anything like that. And for only 650 gold, they are a steal. Deepwood Scouts and Way Watchers are next. These are 360 skirmishers. Deepwood Scouts are only slightly more expensive than the Glade Guard. Slightly less model count, but a little more missile strength, so their overall volley will be similar in damage, similar in ammunition. They can just move while they're shooting, and they have slightly more range. Super squishy, though, so keep them away from dogs, because they have less HP than the Glade Guard do, and less melee stats than the Glade Guard do. But they can fire while moving, 360. Those Shiver Shards, however, lose some of that range, and they gain missile strength and magic attacks. These guys are better against demons, though you have to get a little closer to fire those shots, and they are 175 gold more expensive. Then you have your Way Watchers. Way Watchers, farthest range of any skirmish archer in the entire game. Any skirmish foot archer, I should say. I don't know if there's a larger one otherwise. Incredibly high armor-piercing missile strength. Hawkish Precision gives them more damage if no one is nearby, which is quite nice. And they do have Stalk, which I believe, yeah, the Deepwood Scouts also have Stalk. So if they're out of range of enemies spotting them, artillery can't draw a beat on these guys. Okay melee stats, but 60 model count, low armor, low HP. They generally don't want to get caught by dogs or anything. And then you have Hawkeyes or Jakira, the ROR Way Watchers, with Discouraged. For the amount of missile strength you have, you do so much damage in a single volley that the Discouraged usually is enough to rout something in one volley, because huge burst of damage, your leadership goes way down, and then minus 16 more, and you just decide it's not worth your time and you leave. They also have a smoke bomb they can pop, reducing someone's speed by 60% when they're near the Hawkeyes, allowing them to run to safety. And they continue to shoot you in the face while you chase them. Cavalry and Chariots. Grab the missile cav just for fun. All right, your light cav is kind of all of your cav, whatever. Light cav, you have Glade Riders with spears, 550 gold for 32 melee defense, 28 melee attack. Light cavalry, low HP, low model count, low armor. They're very, very squishy. You just kind of use them if you have to. They can run down archers, run down light infantry, or dual enemy light cavalry. Wild Riders, a little bit higher on the stat pool, have Frenzy for more melee attack, but very low armor and very low melee defense make them incredibly squishy against anything you're fighting. So anything you fight will always be a trade of HP. You do want Wild Riders to fight things that are light armor but around their price point, because they aren't great at just clearing out chaff over and over again. As I said, they'll get whittled down. So you do have to find very specific targets for Wild Riders. Wild Riders with shields, just more melee defense and silver shields to help them out a little bit. Great Stag Knights. Well, actually, the Wild Hunters of Kurnoss. Wild Hunters of Kurnoss are the ROR Wild Rider. They have armor piercing and anti-large. The other ones don't have either of those. So these guys are your first cavalry piece that can actually duel heavy cavalry nicely. And with very high stats, including Frenzy, they'll usually get the better of any cav engagement. Cavalry usually doesn't have very high stats. The Wild Hunters of Kurnoss are unique in that aspect. And with a little bit of physical resistance, that can't hurt either. All the Wild Riders have it. Great Stag Knights also have physical resistance. They have Frenzy as well for more melee attack. These guys come in with a lot of armor-piercing weapon strength compared to Wild Riders. These are your first heavy cav. They're monstrous shock cavalry, to be fair. Their charge attacks are brutal versus infantry. Little reindeer animations are quite good. They have woodsmen, so they can fight in the woods like all Wood Elf units. Fight in the woods without the debuffs cavalry would normally take. These guys are great at killing monstrous infantry, single entities, or enemy heavy cavalry. Lost Sylvan Knights are the ghost versions. Higher stats, frostbite, magic damage, and they do have 55% physical resistance from being a ghost. The problem with the Lost Sylvan Knights is already Wood Elves have a lot of physical resistance, as we're seeing, so people usually want to bring magic damage versus Wood Elves anyway, and magic damage goes straight through the Lost Sylvan Knights' physical resistance, leaving them with 0 armor and bronze shields. Not ideal. So Lost Sylvan Knights can be very squishy, which is problematic. They're also not unbreakable, so they can rout. For your Missile Cavalry, we have Glade Riders, just Glade Riders with spears, lesser melee stats, but you got a bow attack now, so you can get some decent damage out at a range. And a range of 150 is not bad. Pay 100 more gold and get Hadbane tips for poison and magic damage, but that's about it. And then in the sky, we can have armor-piercing Hawk Riders, where they have armor-piercing in melee because of the hawks they're riding, but their missiles aren't actually armor-piercing. You have to be careful about that. And with only 24 models, they don't have the most DPS. But if your opponent doesn't have any anti-air at all, Hawk Riders can freely pick their targets and then dive in on wounded units to finish them off and rout them off the battlefield. Very squishy when on the ground, with less than 5,000 HP and 15 armor. And Sisters of the Thorn are a hybrid cavalry. They're just categorized as a magical cavalry. Decent melee attack and melee defense, still squishy from the lack of armor and HP, but incredibly high leadership, good missile strength with poison, and a very high speed. And then they do have bound spells that help them in their melee engagements they choose to take. Curse of Honor here can make your opponent nearly useless, and Shield of Thorns can reflect some of the damage back at them. And with 40% physical resistance, you do need magic damage if you're going to deal with the Sisters of the Thorn. If you're fighting Wood Elves, honestly, bring magic damage, bro. Know what you're doing without it. Final category, monsters and beasts. Eagles do not cause terror, so they are 50 gold cheaper than a Manticore to not cause terror, and they are a worse duelist than Manticores. Low HP pool, low armor, as you're hearing a lot. That is a bit of a problem, but they are insanely fast and still have a good weapon strength. Dive in and snipe out something else that is low armor. Speaking of armor, Treekin exist. Treekin have 90 armor, very high melee defense, high physical resistance. They're immune to psychology, and they have Vanguard deployment with a charge defense versus large. Treekin are monstrous infantry to help out your front line, but like your front line, they're also not great at blitzing enemies. Usually they want to hold, like Dryads and Eternal Guard are more about holding than really killing stuff. Treekin will just make sure enemy monsters can't get through your front line either. They are an unbreakable wall that will give your archers time to shoot. Firebark Elders are similar, except they have a flame resistance aura, and they themselves have flame resistance as well, which they can make other people around them immune to fire. They deal fire damage and magic damage, which is nice, with a decently high weapon strength. This is good against factions like Chaos Dwarves that are trying to spam fire damage into the Wood Elves to reduce your healing, but also hurt any tree-based units with fire. The basic Tree Man has the negating magical weapons in the vicinity, and he causes terror. Other than that, he has no bound spells. He has pretty okay melee stats, but he's crazy slow. Can be a bit of a problem. to get him into the right fights. He's just kind of a different giant. He's a different giant. Forest Dragon is a dragon. Not a whole lot else to say about that. Has 3 breath attacks that are quite nice. Magic and poison attacks, high weapon strength, but does not want to get caught on the ground for too long. It's a dragon. You've seen a dragon on a billion different rosters. Good at breaking boxes, decent at dueling, good at getting air control. And we have Zotes. Zotes are Dragon Ogre Shaggoths reskinned. Anti-large, armor-piercing, monstrous infantry. Great at killing other monstrous infantry or heavy cavalry. Not so great at fighting infantry of any kind, or at getting shot, or at fighting, I guess, a lord. They do okay, but not great. They can dampen, get rid of people's magic attacks and spell resistance, making their own... Ooh, they don't have physical resistance. I guess that'll help, like, all the other units on the roster, I guess. They only have missile resist, so... Dang. But they have magic attacks, so they can get through enemy physical resistance. Significant bonus versus large means they're supposed to be just fighting large targets. If fighting infantry, they only have 30 melee attack, which is not that great. You do have bound spells, 2 Earth Bloods, 2 Flesh to Stones. The Flesh to Stones are honestly more useful than the Earth Blood. The Enigmas of Ghyron, higher stats, yada yada. You've heard all that before for all the regiments for now, but they have a one-time use regrowth and still the Flesh to Stones with the higher stats. For the final time, let's make up some theoretical builds versus Skaven. How to beat Skaven as Wood Elves. Durthu's really good. There's a couple ways to play this, but personally I like Durthu with Flock of Doom. And then Wildheart. Okay. So we got the Durthu. Then we have a bunch of Dryads. Then we get a bunch of War Dancers. And then we grab Blade Riders. And a single Wild Rider. This can work on like small maps like Pillar of Bone, where you have good Vanguard options. What you do is you deploy Durthu and the 5 Dryads behind the enemy, the War Dancers, the Glade Riders, and the Wild Rider in front of the enemy. And you sandwich them in between these 2 forces, and then your Glade Riders come around the sides. And Durthu, with his Sword of Daith and Flock of Doom, he should be able to create a hole in the backline. Even if they put something to defend against your Dryads, you should be able to delete an infantry unit with those 2 spells, or even 2 or 3 infantry units. And then your Dryads are on the backline of the Skaven, and all of a sudden Skaven are running in every direction. If they go with a Molder monster blob, Durthu can still dual Hellpit Abominations well, so just take out everything that's not the Hellpit Abominations, and then in the late game, have Durthu carefully fight the Hellpits on top of your support, but honestly they might get army lost at that point. If you're on a bigger map, you can go with something entirely different. Drycha is fine. Take her on foot with Melkoths and summon. Keep her nice and cheap. And then you can hard rush. Dryads are still very good versus Skaven. Can go with a Waystalker for sniping out lords, but I don't know. It is whatever. Blade Guard Starfire Shafts, pretty good against Hellpit Abominations if they exist, or Rat Ogres, and their armor-piercing shots are still good against Ikit Claw or the Greyseer, so I do recommend some of those. Odd Hunters of Kurnoss are nearly unbreakable, and they're very hard for Skaven to get rid of. And you can grab some of these. You can grab the Lost Sylvan Knights for a terror-causing ghost unit to run through with max armor-piercing. That's possible. It is still very good. I personally would rather go wider with Wild Riders and then Great Stag Knight. So something like that, you can just hard rush them with some Glade Guard firing over the top to reduce Clan Molder effectiveness. There's a lot of ways to play this. You can also Waywatcher Kite them, but I'm not going to go through a third build for one matchup. So that's low leadership defensive faction. What about high leadership rushing? What about Khorne? Khorne. You really don't want any infantry versus Khorne. He's so good at killing them and those power up Khorne's army passive. So we're gonna do just a Spellweaver on a Great Eagle, get her off the ground so that Karanak can't run her down. Let's do high magic. So we're gonna do Apotheosis and Tempest. Cut all this stuff except for Arcane Conduit and Great Eagle. So Tempest is nice at slowing down Chaos Furies in the sky or Valkia. And Apotheosis is good for healing up anybody you need. And then we got a hard kite him. You can't fight Khorne in melee as Wood Elves. That's not going to work. Triple Waywatch, including the Hawkeyes of Jakira. Does a lot of damage to Chaos Furies. Can also grab 2 Deepwood Scouts with Shiftshiver Shards as well to deal with Flesh Hounds and Furies. but also just get some damage out after that onto Minotaurs or Blood Beasts of Khorne. From there, we just want to max out light cavalry as much as we can. Hold on. If I don't grab you, I can grab 3 Wild Riders. That could be worth it. Your Wild Riders just need to block in case your archers ever get into trouble. You're never going to win a cav fight with what I brought here. You can win a cav fight as Wood Elves, but not with what we brought here. But this is all about the 5 archers need to carry the game, and any dog, Fleshhound, Fury that gets close either has to get routed off with Tempest, in the case of the Furies, and then shot while they're slowed, or the Wild Riders need to charge the Furies when they're on the ground, or the dogs need to get charged by these guys on their way in. If the enemy has Chaos Knights and whatever, Blood Crushers, Skull Crushers, you need to sacrifice a Wild Rider or a Glade Rider slowly and have all your Way Watchers and Deepwood Scouts shoot those guys. Leave their infantry alone. Leave their infantry for dead last. Just snipe out everything else and you'll be fine. If there's Valkia, ignore her. Don't try and snipe her. She's too small. Like, a lot of your arrows are going to miss and it's not worth your time. Kill everything mobile besides Valkia. If it's Scarbrand, shoot the hell out of him. Go for it. That's great. But shoot everything besides Valkia. And then when you get down to just infantry and Valkia, then kill all the infantry. Leave Valkia for dead last, and then hope she either gets army lost or cycle charger with Wild Riders and your Lord. And you can even use Tempest on Valkia as like a Spirit Leech type thing, because it still does damage to her even if she's land. This can be a decent way to deal with Khorne. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. Goodbye.
Subscribe, yes, yes.